Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jack Zemlicka, technology editor for Farm Equipment Magazine and Precision Farming Dealer. Welcome to the latest webinar from Precision Farming Dealer. Today's event about successful strategies for selling and servicing implement guidance systems is brought to you and other pre-registrants free, courtesy of MBW. Our presenter today is Jason Pennycook, who serves as Precision Farming Specialist with Johnson Tractor, based in Janesville, Wisconsin. Jason has been selling and servicing implement guidance equipment for the last 6 years. He has extensive experience targeting and training customers on the payback of implement guidance, which are keys to a successful sale. His presentation today will take a look at some of the different implement guidance systems on the market, what return on investment farmers can expect, and how dealers can identify the best candidates for this emerging precision technology. Before we turn things over to Jason, I have a couple of quick housekeeping items. On your screen, there is an arrow you can click on that will open up a question field and allow you to submit questions at any time during the presentation. Time permitting, we will look to answer as many questions as possible following Jason's presentation. If we don't get to all of them, we'll make sure we send the remaining questions home with Jason so he can answer them. We'll also be posting those answers on precisionfarmingdealer.com along with the archived video replay of the webinar, so you can go back and review it if you'd like. If for any reason your internet connection or our connection should happen to fail at some point, and it looks like the webinar has been interrupted, just go back to that email you received earlier telling you how to join the webinar, and you can re-enter the webinar that way. With that, I think we're ready to go. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon. We will now turn things over to Jason Pennycook for his presentation. Take it away, Jason.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy day to join in on this presentation. Jason Pennycook. Like you said, I've been working for Johnson Tractor. Been doing guidance and precision farming specialist for 6 years now. Just give you a brief overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll be covering the types of implement guidance, the capabilities of the different types of implement guidance, considerations when you're selling implement guidance, target customers, the benefits of implement guidance, and considerations for deciding if your dealership or business wants to sell implement guidance. With that, we'll get going here. The two basic types of implement guidance are passive guidance, which uses a receiver on the implement and the tractor, and then shifts the tractor guidance lines over to get the implement online. The second type would be active guidance. There are multiple choices for active guidance. Steering coulters, tongue steers, load-bearing wheels, 2-point steers, the tongue steer with 2-point hitch, and articulated 3 points. Each one has their own benefits and specific uses are used for. I would say that probably the most popular ones you'll run into are the tongue steers and steering coulters. Capabilities of implement guidance. With passive guidance, you'll usually decrease your implement drift by 50%. Since we're using the tractor to move the implement's not actually guiding itself, just the tractor is shifting its guidance lines over to move the planter online. You will get about 50% decrease in implement drift. Some of the downsides to this being in certain applications, such as if you've got a customer that's ridging or building beds, that can sometimes interfere with that because it's moving the tractor over and not just guiding the implement. You can also run into issues with compaction over a strip till zone. The system just uses a second GPS antenna that's mounted on the implement to let the system know where the implement is in comparison to the tractor. One thing I always look at with any of the implement guidance is what type of correction is the customer using. You can use it on anything from WAS all the way up to RTK, and with most things, the better your correction, the better performance and accuracy you're going to get out of the system. That's always one thing to keep in mind when talking to people about it. Active guidance, you'll have a GPS receiver that also mounts on the piece of equipment, and a form of a guidance controller that mounts on the implement as well. With some systems with active guidance, you will just have a sensor that mounts on the hitch. For some of the hydraulic hitches, you'll just have a sensor that mounts on the hitch and not actually a controller back on the implement. One of the things to consider is how far the system can move the implement. That would come into play with like the coulter bars, steering coulters. That's right at the work point where stuff is being done on the implement. That being said, that's going to, move the implement where it needs to be, especially in you get into steeper angles. That's going to keep it there. Your tongue steers and 2-point and even your articulated, you have so much movement one direction or the other. So that could be a factor depending on the type of terrain your customer's actually in. Same with active guidance as with passive. Type of GPS correction is, I feel, is very important. If you're going to be doing implement guidance, most of the people doing it are already on an RTK level or at least OmniStar. I've had very few that have been doing implement guidance on WAS correction. Some of the considerations to keep in mind when you are doing, when you're going to be selling implement guidance. Know what displays will work with the system you're trying to sell. Not every system usually has a couple different displays it works with. Not every company offers the ability to do implement guidance. I know the few main ones that I know do would be John Deere's iSteer. Trimble has their True Guide and True Tracker. Pro Tracker has their own display that uses a gyroscope mounted on the hitch, and Auto Farm also has a display for doing implement guidance. You also need to know what unlocks the display will need to operate the system. Pretty much every system, there is an unlock for the display that will need to be taken into consideration. So the customer knows ahead of time that we got the system, we are going to have unlocks in the display. That way you don't get caught where, you get the system in and then you realize, oh, we didn't have the unlock on a quote. Very important thing is find out what the customer is looking for in implement guidance. If the customer is looking for, he's just planting, he just wants to keep his cheat rows closer on some contours or some slightly rolling ground, then a passive system will probably, be exactly what he needs. He may not need anything more than that. If you are, if he's got making multiple passes across the same field, then active guidance would be a better choice. That way when he comes back in, the implement and the tractor are both on their guidance lines to keep it in line, and you get less damage to crop, and he can follow his line the way he's looking to do. And if you're going to start selling implement guidance, I'd start with a small group of customers. you'll have a group of customers that are already heavy into technology, and that would be a good group to pitch it to start with. They know their systems already, and they're usually more open to new ideas and new technology. The reason you want to start with a small group is it helps. That way, you know you can get those systems running, and if there is any issues, you don't have 50 systems out there. You just have a few, then you can get it going, and by word of mouth, that will help increase the sales on that. Last point here is also, we'd want to find out what GPS correction they're using. Your target customers, I would say the biggest market for implement guidance right now would be growers doing strip till. Those customers are making multiple passes. They want to get their seed right back in that strip every time. There's a lot more customers going to strip till. That is, in my opinion, the biggest market for it at the moment. Other one would be growers with contour strips and terraces. Anyone who's ever planted any contour strips or terraces knows that implement guidance is a big factor in keeping your line straight, your rows lined up as you're going across that terrace. Another big sales opportunity for implement guidance is growers with special crops, whether that be potatoes, onions, sugar beets, any kind of vegetable crops. They're usually, some of those vegetable crops, they make multiple passes over it every year, and the implement guidance is just a next step for them for their operations. Growers with rolling terrain and hillsides. Anyone who has a problem with implements, a lot of drift, it's a good choice to talk to them about it as well. Growers that are side dressing and cultivating. Run into this a lot, where you get grower plants with a 24 row, but he may go out and side dress or cultivate with a 16 row because his last planter was a 16 row and they still have the cultivator around or the side dress bar. Implement guidance is will help them out tremendously so they're not running over rows. And as always, large implements, planters, everything keeps getting bigger every year. Implement guidance helps to keep all of these larger implements behind the tractor so you're not getting inconsistent sheet rows and guess rows. Benefits of implement guidance. The Kansas State University did a research study that shows seed placement and strip till fertilizer rows and yield. What they did in this study was they checked seed placement directly over a strip, 3.75 inches off the strip, 7.5 inches off the strip, and 15 inches off the strip. And over several years, what they found was that between center of the strip and the 3.75 inches off the strip is where you will get your best yield potential off of planting. Now, using a study like that is a big benefit to growers and you in selling this implement guidance. They have numbers they can look at and they can see over several years that yes, the purple within 3.75 inches off the row consistently had the best yield over all those 3 years. Now, once a customer sees some information like this that says, okay, using implement guidance, I can increase my yield. That does help them get over, some of the big steps are the cost. I mean, you're looking over $10,000 or more, 10 to 20, depending on the system and what display and guide and correction source you're using for an active guidance system. And sometimes that can be a big stepping stone for certain growers. But if they can see that they can get a yield increase by keeping on their strips, a lot of times that helps in that selling point, because then they can see that there will be a payback on it, and it's something that they should be doing. And it's just a matter of informing customers that, you know, increased accuracy will improve, you know, revenue through better yields, less inputs. If you're, you know, not drifting over and over applying fertilizer, anhydrous, whatever it is, because you're keeping your implement online and it's actually getting to the plant, that will lead to increased revenue and better yields, which is really what all growers are looking for. Less input cost, more profit, more yields. The major benefit to any implement guidance is operators making multiple passes. There's a lot more guys out there doing a lot of high management corn, where they're not just putting nitrogen down in the fall or dry spread in the fall and spraying on fertilizer in the spring. They're doing a dry spread in the fall that they're running in strips, and then they come back and they put pop-up on with the planter, and then they might make one or two more passes to spoon feed nitrogen out throughout the year. Now, the straighter you can have your rows going across the field, the less crop damage they're going to end up with, because they can stay on the rows with their guidance lines without actually running over crop. The more dramatic the terrain is, as far as rolling hills, terraces, you get more benefit. The steeper the terrain, the more rolling it is, because those are the terrains where you get the most planter drift, or strip till bar drift, cultivator drift, and that's where they're going to see the most benefit. You will see a benefit in flat ground as well, but the main majority of your benefit is going to be in rolling ground, contour strips, and those type of areas. Now we come into considerations for deciding to sell implement guidance. One of the main things you need to look at is what kind of operations are in your area. If you have, is it small operations, large operations, mid-sized operations? Usually the larger operations tend to have an look at this and go, you know, I can see that'll pencil out. My return on investment seems a lot better, because my acres, with the amount of acres, I can get my return on investment within a year or two. Smaller operations, sometimes they are a little more hesitant about taking that step up to implement guidance. Another consideration is, as far as what operations you have, how many implements are they using? What type of implements? I mean, that could affect what system you would actually try and sell them. As far as if they're just pulling a planter with it and drill in the fall just for doing wheat, I mean, the passive system may be fine. They just got it on two pieces of equipment. You can just take that display and that receiver off the planter and move it to the next piece of equipment. They can have the passive guidance on that. Are they doing multiple operations where they're strip tilling, planting, and then side dressing? And they want active guidance. Well, there you got to look at price. What do they want to? How much do they want to invest in this technology? And that would depend on what you wanted to go towards selling them. If they don't want to put a coulter bar on every piece of equipment, A good option for that type of operation is hydraulic hitch. That way it can be run on multiple pieces of equipment, and they don't have to have a, coulter bar and everything on each piece of equipment. They can just have one on the main tractor they're using and then switch all the implements throughout the season and still have their implement guidance. Another consideration to look at is make sure your staff is trained on how to sell and install the systems. Some of the systems are very simple to install. Passive guidance is actually, on most systems, is very simple to install. You're just adding another receiver. You have to put in your measurements, and then you would just, go out and do your calibration, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. As far as active systems go, depending on the system, some of those would be a lot more involved. You'll have hydraulics involved, other controllers, as far as and as well as a receiver, and you want to make sure that your staff is has the latest information on those products, on how to sell it, its capabilities, and how to install it. Nothing puts a bitter taste in the customer's mouth like spending the money for implement guidance and then having it not function correctly. And the big thing to help there, as long as your staff is trained on operation and install, it saves a lot of those headaches when you come to actually getting to the customer. Also need to make sure that your customers have the training they need to operate the system. Several ways to do this. We do in-house training at the store, or field days. Get the customers out there, get them in the tractor, let them run the system, see how it works, get some hands-on. That is a good way to get them some knowledge and sell the equipment. Most guys, if they're thinking, you get them in a tractor and they can see what it does and the benefits they can get out of it. That is a big selling point in your favor. You're not going to sell it to everyone who rides in a tractor, but if you can get 15, 20 guys to ride and you can get 1 or 2 sales out of it, I call that a win. You get guys out there, get it out there, know you can do it. It's also a layer you can add to what you're already selling, the services you provide to your customers. You're already selling them guidance. You're doing variable rate. You're doing, section control on planters, section control on sprayers. And you want the customers to, they're good with it. They all like that technology. They're using it. More and more customers are getting comfortable with it. And there's a lot of guys that are looking for that next step to give them that next increase in profit. And this would be another one of those options that you would have to sell to them to help them get to that next step. Other considerations to look at when want to be a dealer was the amount of people you have allotted to implement guidance. For the most part, once it's set up, there's really not that many issues with it. So if you have, depending on how many stores you're selling out, if you've got 1 or 2 guys trained in the shop to go out and troubleshoot the system, then you should be fine. That should be able to keep all your customers happy and running on a basis. Let me go back here to one of the slides. I wanted to bring up something about the articulated hitch. The articulated hitch is a good option for customers who are doing cultivating whether that be for organic crops or anyone pulling a 3-point mounted side dress bar. Because the advantage that gives you is you're right there, and what that's doing is every time the tractor moves, that is just tilting the articulating the 3-point back and forth to keep the 3-point mounted implement square with the rows, so that when the tractor moves, you're not getting cultivator blight or running over and pinching rows every time the front end of the tractor moves a little bit to keep on the guidance line. Okay, well, that was going a little quicker than I thought. So if anyone does have any questions, we can start submitting those.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Some good detail. And we actually we do have a number of questions that we'd like to see if you could field here. One of the questions we had was just are there any kind of regional or geographic considerations maybe dealers should take into account before exploring whether or not they want to add implement guidance systems to their arsenal?
I think the biggest thing with any regional or geographic thing would be terrain. Terrain and kinds of operations. I mean, since throughout the United States, everyone's doing different crops. And like I said, the big thing is with hillier terrain and more rolling terrain, that would be an area where I would say would be a very good spot to do it. Another area which is also very good it would be any place with high numbers of specialty crops, whether that be a vegetable crop, organic crops. That would be a good place to use implement guidance.
Great. Another question we had here coming on was what are maybe some of the more common questions that you're getting from customers about these systems? If they're unfamiliar, I mean, they may have some sort of guidance, like you said, but if they want to take it that next step, what type of questions are you kind of fielding from customers?
Main question I run into is how well is this going to keep my guess rows at 30 inches if they're doing 30-inch? Is this going to keep my guess row at the required distance I want? And that's where you have to go in with, that would depend on what type of system, you're looking to purchase. If you're happy with, if you have, an average 12 inches of drift, and you're happy if you keep it to 6, then a passive system would be fine. If you want to, just let them know that if you want to keep your implement drift within an inch, you're going to need to be on RTK with an active system. And that is the biggest question I get. How well will this keep my planter, strip till bar, whatever, online, so when I come back and plant, will I be there?
All right. Another question we had here was, what's kind of your take on a recommendation for supporting the technology with either full-time staff or possibly a specialized consultant?
I would say that, a PF specialist, if your dealership has a PF specialist, that would be the logical choice for, the person in your dealership to be the spokesman, the person who is up on the technology. And I would recommend, having at least one tech in every location that sells it that has a training and knows how to troubleshoot and operate the system. That way, when there is an issue, if the PS specialist can't make it out there to talk to the customer, then you have a tech who's available that can go out and service that customer, keep him going, keep him happy.
All right. Another question we had here is, for a dealer that might be getting into this, what kind of service support or training should they expect from, whatever vendor they might be working with? I mean, maybe you can share a little bit about what your experience was as far as getting up to speed as a dealer on this technology before taking it to customers.
Yeah, and that would all depend on, the training provided, all depends on what the manufacturer, what they offer. Before we started doing it, we just researched and got a hold of the manufacturers we deal with to find out if they had any training, whether that be in one-on-one training or whether it be online. And all the training you can get, is well worth it. If they, let's say the company you're dealing with doesn't offer an extensive amount of training, then you're going to be doing a little bit of, hands-on. But most companies do offer some form of training, whether it be a classroom setting or online. And before anyone decides to do it, I would definitely recommend taking, if there's any online classes, take those to start with, and that'll get you, a better understanding of how the system works, how it operates, what you need to look for, and how it needs to be set up.
Okay. Another question we had here is, you kind of alluded, obviously, to the cost of some of these systems, but for you, what do you see as kind of some of the biggest challenges to selling these systems to customers?
Actually, the biggest challenge is still cost. You would think that wouldn't be the case. But they've spent money for their guide. They've spent money for guidance on tractors and planners, and the big factor there is that most OEMs now, guidance comes standard on most tractors. All their variable rate technology, clutches, all of that comes standard on their planners. So they're not adding much onto equipment anymore, and then this would be something they have to add on, and cost is still the big factor. There are tremendous benefits to it, and you will see a return on investment on the system, but it's just that initial cost that sometimes makes people balk a little bit.
Well, and kind of playing off of that answer, another question we have is just kind of conveying that return on investment to customers, kind of overcoming that cost hurdle. I know you made a couple of points during your presentation, but maybe that's something you could add a little bit more context to some experience you've had. I think that was a question we had here.
Okay. And that, of course, is all going to depend on the size of the operation. Now, let's say, and granted, corn prices have dropped, so it will take a little bit down, but on average, let's say you got a guy with a 1,500 acre operation, and he's strip tilling. Now, if he can increase, and I will go back to that slide, but if he will, if he can increase by, let's say a 5 bushel average over, getting his crop placed within that 3.75 inch zone around his strip. If you have a five bushel increase over 1,500 acres, your return on investment adds up pretty quick. And that could be a big seller, especially if a guy's doing strip till or wanting to get his fertilizer placement where he wants it. And that would be strip till, whether it be putting anhydrous down in the fall or banding liquid and dry. So you will see a big improvement, and your payback would be relatively quick on that. You could be looking at paying that off within 2 years.
Okay. Another question here is just, again, perhaps drawing on your experience, was, any lessons learned or kind of pitfalls to avoid for dealers, just kind of starting to get into this technology, or again, kind of considering adding this to their uh, offerings?
Oh, the biggest pitfall I can see is just you need to make sure what all unlocks need to be purchased to run it with the display you're using. That includes not only the unlock for the implement guidance, but unlocks for the second receiver, um, to what correction level they want. Because that can always come back and, you think you've got everything priced out and then go back and look. And I think that is the biggest pitfall, is just the unlocks that are usually involved with selling implement guidance.
Okay. A couple more questions here. Um, One of them was just, you referenced the study in your presentation that certainly seems like a pretty good selling point. Any other research that's out there that perhaps you could point dealers toward, that they could maybe use as ammunition when kind of conveying this ROI to customers?
Yeah, I mean, you can check, a lot of the, state extension offices will have references to strip tilling or any of those. Those are good. The Alabama Precision Ag Extension has some good information on implement guidance. I think that they have a like a 3-page report they got out that just goes, it basically just explains the systems, but it also gives a list of what manufacturers are out there, what the system's called, and what guidance system is capable of running it, and components required. That's a very good, I mean, it's a couple years old, so it's a little outdated, but there is some good information in it. Dealing with your, I mean, any and every information you want that customers need, a lot of times you can go right to, I mean, the customer can do it as well, but most of the manufacturers and implement guidance have very good information on their websites about it, whether that be Deere, Trimble, ProTrack, or all of those have very good information on their websites, and actually most of those state studies from other universities as well. And usually when I'm looking for it, if someone needs more information, I just start checking extension offices. Iowa's always a good one to check. They usually have a bunch of information. Ohio, Indiana. That's a great knowledge base for any information that would, benefit strip till and trying to get it sold to a customer.
All right. And I think one last question we had here was, you obviously mentioned too, with equipment getting bigger, that there might be more of a market for implement guidance. Maybe you could kind of share with you what you kind of see the adoption or market, kind of how that's going to maybe unfold here in the next few years. Where do you see this technology going?
Oh, I see. 24 rows is the main size of planters that we sell anymore. The majority of them are all 24 rows, and they're starting to get bigger, 36, 48 rows. And these planters, the bigger they get, you can get implement drift even on flat ground. They can just pull, so a few inches one way or the other. I can see within the next several years where there's going to be more OEM manufacturers that are doing their own solution to solve this problem, to keep planters online and cheat rows or guess rows consistent and not running into this problem with implement drift. With a lot more people going to strip till or zone till or zone fertilizer, that's going to be a key factor in implement guidance increasing in popularity. If you're trying to keep with more and more growers working on keeping their nutrients in bands, strips. They want precise placement of their fertilizer and their seed. And as more growers adopt these practices, the sales potential for implement guidance is going to increase right along with it. For the next, for the foreseeable future, as far as I can see, I don't think there's going to be a decrease in need for implement guidance.
And actually, one final question we had here was, again, you mentioned cost kind of being a big hurdle right now, and certainly in some other areas, precision technology has kind of come down price wise. What do you kind of envision for, I guess, the cost of implement guidance systems? Is this something that you see being more affordable in the future? What's your take on that?
I can see some of it, some aspects of it coming down in price. I think once we have more manufacturers who are making implement guidance, that usually helps to bring the price down. The other thing is, with a lot of it, sometimes the prices haven't necessarily dropped. The capabilities have improved. They've added more features to it, but some of the prices are staying relatively the same. I mean, they're not going down, but they're not going up as well, even with added features and more functionality.
All right. Well, I think that's about all the time we've got today. Again, today's presentation and audio will be made available on the Precision Farming Dealer website, and that's at precisionfarmingdealer.com. And you can look for that if you'd like to go back and review the presentation. Watch your email and the e-newsletter for more information. On behalf of Jason Pennycook, the team at MBW, and the Precision Farming Dealer staff, thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. We welcome your feedback on the quality of this webinar and on future topics you'd like to see covered by Precision Farming Dealer. When you exit today's event, you'll be taken to a short survey to share your comments. Thank you again for attending. Have a great afternoon.